What is going on, YouTube? So today I'm going to be breaking down the production of my song The Artist. So this song is long as hell. It's like 7 minutes long, and it's every part's different. There's no parts that repeat, which is like weird. I don't really know. I guess it would be called like through composed in this case. But like I'm not going to break down 100% of every single section. It's going to make no sense. You guys are going to get bored from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down like a few different sections. I think like 2 sections mainly, and then if I feel the need at the end, I'll go back and, gloss over some of the other stuff. But okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this section right here, and then I'm going to play the next section that I'm going to cover. So first, here's this first section. So the basis of this song is a melody that I wrote like way back. I think I wrote this in like 2013, and I was like, how am I going to turn this into a whole song? It turned into this like instrumental sort of like storytelling. Honestly, like if you want to get a full picture, you should go listen to the song, because there's no way that I could either play it out and have you guys care, or like, actually like explain the whole story of it without, like, it's much better if you go listen to it. But anyway, it stemmed from this melody, and I originally recorded it with my nylon string guitar. I have like a Cordoba, like a flamenco nylon string guitar. So believe it or not, like I like DI'd the nylon string and used like I think the bias amp thing. So what you have here is basically just like your stereo print of, hold on, let me see if I can pull up the mix window. Yeah, so this is literally just bias amp. And the most important thing, okay, wait, it's gonna load. Nope. So the most important thing with guitars on any level, in my opinion, is to actually like pan them hard left and hard right. Double them. Don't ever like, duplicate them, because that's not the same thing as doubling them, you know what I mean? And apparently it's a demo version, damn. I know I have a license somewhere. But yeah, so that's the most important thing with guitars, is to actually like double them, have them on the left and the right, so that it's, super spread out, and so that you get that kind of like stereo image with it. So that's crucial. And then the other thing that I had with this guitar was the melody. So it's just like the reason I printed this is because I think that there might have been like a little bit of a timing discrepancy. So instead of moving everything over on both tracks, I think I just printed it on one. But here I have the main melody. And so thing with this is that there's a little bit of volume automation, and honestly, I actually did slice this up to comp it. So yeah, editing guitars is actually, when we're playing guitar, it's really easy to like not think that your timing is that bad. And not necessarily like it's bad, but like you feel like you're tighter than you are. But when you go and put it in a recording, you're like, wait, I'm like so off. So like the biggest thing here is like, getting my guitars to be as in time as possible. So the way that I did that was by actually like going in and slicing these things and making them as on the grid as possible. Like every single note, because this melody is so important, and it's like under a microscope. And when it's under a microscope, you really have to pay attention to like every timing discrepancy. So as a result, when you see it, it just has to be on point. So that's a big part with like, recording guitars on any level. So Yeah, and then the rhythms are they probably weren't quite as edited, because with rhythm guitars, the timing discrepancies between the left and the right are actually what give it that kind of like stereo spread effect, believe it or not. So like with the timing discrepancies on the left and right, you don't actually need those to be perfectly on time. It's just kind of like those lead elements. So that's kind of like the story with the guitars. I'm going to talk about the mix in a separate video. So, but that's basically, what it stems from. It's just like, some chords on the left and right, some arpeggiated chords on the left and right, and then one, guitar, the melody in the center. And then after that, I have my string libraries, which are basically just Kontakt libraries, basically, yeah. Tell me that's not like movie material. I don't know how else to describe it, but yeah, shout out Kontakt libraries. I'm just a huge fan of like these like cliche kind of string sounds, you know what I mean? Because when you hear it in the arrangement, you're just like, this is epic. But yeah, with strings, same thing. It's all about that spread, you know what I mean? And then you kind of got one like low one. So I mean, like, yeah, like what you could do is you could have like multiple different kind of libraries, and you can just have them like, you can arrange different notes. Like you can have them all be kind of like the chords, right? And then you can break it up and have like, one library over here on the left and then one library over here on the right. And then you can have, your bass in the center. Always have your, your bass, your lowest notes in the center, because that's going to be way better and like more balanced sounding. So that's the thing here. And then what I did also in a section is I reversed them in a different section. Actually, yeah. I'll show you that real quick because I think it's really cool while I'm talking about the string stuff. Yeah, because there are several sections in the song where I kind of like reverse stuff for effect. Reversing stuff for effect is really cool. Aside from that, I have some like filtered kind of like, Serum basses. So I really wanted to fill out the center with something that was kind of like mid-rangey and, sounded good. So what I did is I had these phone pads. So this is what my phone pads actually look like. So these like fluttery synths that kind of like, I guess they're not fluttery necessarily, but they're kind of like, really like almost like there's like an LFO to them. This really helps with the movement overall, especially if it's like on an offbeat. You can hear how that's on an offbeat. So what it is basically is it's adding more like rhythm and movement to the track. So. It's a little bit in the background. I just had it kind of soloed there. Not soloed, but I had it a little bit louder. But in the actual mix, it's like, adding that like extra dimension of like, it's almost like pump. It's like pumpiness, but it's like, super, like harmonic, and it just sounds like it's adding some more movement to it. Moving on, now I have a low pad here, and low pads, you're not gonna hear this in the mix, but these lower pads really fill out the mid-range, and that's why I have them, is because they're really just kind of like, adding a lot more mid-range to the mix as a whole, and that's going to result in just like a more filled out sound. So, stacking layers is super important when it comes to like, filling out the mid-range. It's really easy to fill out the bass. It's really easy to fill out the top end. It's that mid-range that has to be, a little bit, cared for and tended to, because it gets neglected sometimes when it comes to an arrangement. So low pads are a great way to kind of like supplement that. And then I got my 808. So my 808 is basically just, a Kontakt library. It's a clean 808, and then I distort it a little bit later. But, it has a little bit of like a sustain to it so that it's not, just like decaying immediately. And these long 808s are crucial when it comes to like these like sort of like held out arrangements. So that's why I kind of like, make sure that I adjust the sustain and, release and decay so that it's like, the right shape for the arrangement. And then I actually do have an octave up 808. That's actually filling out that kind of You know, you could distort it and add more harmonics that way, but in this case, I just wanted to add an octave up 808. And it's pretty much there throughout the whole song, except for in the beginning, because it kind of just adds more juice to the bass. And when you have just like a low sub, like sub is not, like sub itself, like that like 20 to, 60 hertz or whatever, that's not going to translate on every single sound system unless they have that, like, they're able to play back at those frequencies, like a subwoofer in like a car, or like if you have a sub in your studio. So like having, an extra layer on top of that, an octave up, kind of like ensures that the bass kind of like pokes through. So here's With It. It's a little subtle sounding, but I mean, it's definitely there helping out the mid-range. So the other thing is that I have a kick that's kind of matching all this stuff. And this kick is very clicky, and it doesn't have a whole lot of bass to it. And the reason for that is because I'm actually getting a lot of the bass from the sub itself. So let me see if I can find it. Yeah, that's my kick. It's a very kind of like punchy, but not too like... So trap kicks have a lot more like bass and thump and body to them, and like I feel like EDM kicks a lot of times they kind of like let the sub take care of that kind of like punchiness. So like here the main goal was to get some punch and some click out of it, and less like sort of like thump and like subby sort of frequencies out of it, because like the bass in this case, the sub, the 808 sub, is actually like taking care of a lot of that like super low end. So the kick here is just adding more punch to that. Like, it almost sounds like a rock kick. It has like, that like really clicky sound to it that like, a lot of rock kicks have. So that was the goal behind this kick. It's not really like a trap kick at all. It's more of like, I'd classify that more as like an EDM type of kick. But yeah. And then I have my claps verb. So I have these claps here that are basically just like really reverby. And what this is it's just a bunch of clap samples that I kind of layered. Cool, so when you have like multiple claps, it's really helpful to pan them to the sides and to have them be super to the left and super to the right. As you could see, all this stuff is panned. And obviously like there's like a fuck ton of reverb on them, but like the fact that they're panned so hard really gives that kind of like spread to it. So yeah, layering claps is an art, honestly, and you can really just go crazy, and just get carried away like wearing all these claps together. So that's really what it is. I just have like a battery library that I set up that has like, tons of claps in it, and I just get to, pick out my favorite ones and put them in the arrangement. So, not that one, but like, yeah, that kind of gives you an idea of like how I layer everything and spread everything out and then give it a ton of reverb. I'll talk about the reverb later in the arrangement. I mean, I would consider that reverb part of the, arrangement process, because like it wouldn't sound the same at all without the reverb. But yeah, and then I layered some stuff on top of those claps as well. So like, you wouldn't notice that by listening to it in the mix, but it kind of just adds another like dimension of like spaciness and reverb to this. You could probably hear it now that I like sold it and like, pointed it out. You could probably hear that there. But again, like, it comes back to like where I'm huge on like, making things like melodic and harmonic sounding and just like incredible in terms of like, the amount of like spaciness and just like lusciousness to everything. So I think that adds a little bit to that. And then here I have some snaps. Again, more of that, more like, so it's two different snaps. So it's basically like, as you can see, like these snap samples, a big part about snaps in general is to have them like delayed. So you can see like, here in the audio is that they have the snaps so that they're kind of like, one is like comes sooner than the other one. And that kind of creates that sort of like, spread out snap sound is like, the timing discrepancies between samples is really what kind of gives you that illusion of like space. And then this other snap is just another added layer on here. So kind of like if you zoom in on these snaps, you'll see that, I have them both happening kind of at the same time. But like, yeah, just another added layer to that. And then I think it makes sense for me to talk about this just a little bit since I'm on the subject of like snares and claps and snaps and all that. I have another, this is just a sample, but like this just goes to show you like sometimes like you can do too much. Like you can easily do too much, but like I just kind of layered stuff on and didn't really care if I was doing too much, so I just added another things here. You'll see. Yeah. And when you put everything together, it's just so much. And I'm actually sidechaining the kick to the reverb as well. That's like a huge EDM trick, but I'm going to go into that in the mix video. And here's without that like clang sound. Like, it sounds dope, but it's not like 100%. Like, it's almost like it's missing a little bit of that like top end to it. That like I don't really even want to call it top end, but it's just like, you know, it's like a higher end sort of clang shine that I just get from this sample, from adding the sample. So I'm gonna play it, and halfway through I'm gonna add it in. You can see that it just adds a little bit more of that like sort of like top end to the reverb, to that whole like spacey reverb, you know, depth thing that I'm going for. So that's huge with that. And then I have, you know, several different sound effects, several different, you know, swells and things like that. I think one thing that's worth going into is these clicks and clacks here, because all right, so here's the deal. I didn't want to use cymbals here. I didn't want to use hi-hats because I didn't feel like this section needed hi-hats. I don't really know. It needed some rhythmic elements to it. So I solved that in a few different ways. You know, we're kind of in that next wave of production where it's just like we're really trying to figure out like what we could do with our percussions to make them different, to kind of like add stuff, because we don't know what trap hi-hats sound like at this point. You know what I mean? Like there's only so much you can do with trap hi-hats. It's always going to sound great, you know, if you're doing enough with it and if you're, you know, picking the right samples and whatnot. But like you know, we're going to move past that into like other different sounds. So a big thing that I discovered is this like clicks and clacks type of situation. I don't really even know what to call these types of samples, but let me show you what I'm talking about. You know, some of you may recognize this type of sound, but yeah, check it out. So the reason why this is cool is because my song is like this sort of like storytelling, you know, like the artist who's like the tortured artist, and he's like fucked up, and he, you know, has like, you know, lost himself or whatever. So it's like time is running out or time is slowing down or whatever. And so this sounds a lot like kind of like a clock. You know what I mean? Like when you listen to it, it's like, oh, like the clock is ticking or whatever, you know? So, you know, it's just like these like clicks and clacks, man. These clicks and clack samples, like literally like just click, click, you know, like, and I have a whole bunch of like, you know, different sounds here, obviously, but like these clicks and clacks, I program them as if I would program hi-hats, you know what I'm saying? So like this is pretty much exactly how I would program hi-hats. And if you look at it, it's like, yeah, like you could replace this with hi-hats and it would be the same shit, but like just check it out. It's a drum beat. It's like a drum beat. It's obviously like the song is obviously in 6/8, which is really weird. Really weird to have like, you know, these sort of like trappy elements in 6/8 because it's not, you know, quite the normal thing. But like, you know, it really kind of works here. And I kind of like, you know, what my favorite thing to do is to create kind of like a drum beat within these like hi-hats or inside of these like sort of like extraneous, like not extraneous because I guess that implies that they're not needed, but like, you know, these like extra percussive elements, I kind of like make them into a drum beat. So, and having these happen at slightly different velocities and having some of this stuff panned is really what gives it that sound of like there's a lot happening. You know what I mean? You can see the velocities are different, the panning is different, the delivery, the timing of the delivery is different, and that's what really gives this its sort of like, you know, its pop. So like let's just check out the panning real quick. This one's center. Let's maybe this one's panned a little bit to the left. This one's panned a little bit to the left. This one's panned a little bit to the right. Yeah, like, you know, I don't have to keep going. You can kind of get the idea. Like, there's a lot that's happening, you know, with panning, with delivery of timing, with the different velocities and all that. And obviously, like, there's reverb involved. So, like, when you hear it in the mix, it's really cool, and it doesn't sound out of place, because normally when you're picking different percussion samples, you might think that you're scared that it's going to sound out of place because it's not like a diesel trap hi-hat. So you're just like, how am I going to get this like in the mix? But here, when you listen to it, it's just like, oh, that's in the song. You know what I mean? It's like it's in there. So and then I got some of them reversed, because like this song, again, like playing on the concept of like time running out or whatever, or you know, retrospection and looking backwards. So there's a lot of like that reverse effect, and you know, it sounds so cool reversed. Wow. This makes me want to like reverse more things in more of my songs. And I think that, you know, more people should reverse stuff for effect and just like make things pop. And then I had this other snare loop that was basically just chopped up from somewhere else. It's panned, as you can see. Or you can't see. Well, yeah, yeah. So this kind of just like, you know, again, adds to that sort of like thing that I was talking about just like having more percussive elements that aren't necessarily hi-hats. It's like, you know, it's like a drum and bass loop or something that I somehow turned into 6/8, because I know that shit didn't come in 6/8, but so you don't notice a lot of these elements when they're in the mix, but like when you hear them outside of the mix, you're just like, oh, that is definitely playing a role, you know what I mean? And then these shakers, they're literally just like, you know, shakers. One is at a higher volume than the other, so nothing to look into there. Rim shots are cool as well. Okay. That's cool, actually. That makes perfect sense. I had no idea I put that in there. Oh, I know why, though. Because in this first section, there are no Taiko drums, and then the Taiko drums come in. Yeah, so in that first section, there are no Taiko drums, and then the Taiko drums come in and kind of like take over for these rim shots. So that's why I put those in there. I have some like, you know, classic crashes, I want to call them, like really just like that's like, you know, orchestra style crash, which really works because this is kind of like an orchestral EDM-ish song. So it's kind of like, you know, that's the sound. It works well with the acoustic kind of like Taiko drums and everything. So let's talk about these Taiko drums a little bit. I'm gonna let you guys in on a secret. This library is free. This sort of like Sforzando library, just look it up. It's like a free library. It's bomb. Like literally, it's just exactly what you need. Just reverb it. Yeah. Just add mad reverb to it and compress the fuck out of it with like an 1176 on the all setting, and then you'll be like good to go. Check it out. Let me actually play these together. I actually spent a decent amount of time. I will admit, like, you will have to spend some time trying to find some stuff that works like arrangement wise. So like if you play it, actually that's not what took so long. It was kind of like finding the right sort of balance in terms of like the spread, like the left and the right and the center or whatever. So like you got like your center one that's kind of doing like, and then you got your left one that has like, you know, one of those like stick hits, and then you got your right one kind of just like, yeah, just like stacking these samples on top of each other, spreading stuff. I think one of the big takeaways from this whole entire production video is to have like, you know, multiple of the same library just doing different things and panning them separately, because that's what's happening here. That's what's happening with the strings. You don't have to just like stick to like one instance of Kontakt, one instance of this like drum library. You can have multiple, have them doing similar or different things, and then just spread them out, and then you're going to get a really cool result from that. So then I have this like timpani situation here. It's frozen, so I'm not going to go into it. But again, like these like classic drum sounds, like it's a roll. Like tell me that's not exactly the sound that needs to happen in this exact moment of the song. Like I'm not even trying to say like, oh, I'm so great. But like, man, if you just kind of like take the time into like just finding the sound that you need, you know, then it just like makes your arrangement sound that much better. Like you don't have to like rush your sound selection process. I think this was a Native Instruments thing. Full disclosure, it's like easily, I'm pretty sure that's a Native Instruments library. But like I put a lot of care into picking all these different sounds to really make this section, really make this song happen organically. It's like a mix of EDM, orchestral, acoustic, whatever. And so like it's really hard to kind of like fake a lot of this stuff. So I just kind of had to be very careful with my arrangement process. And also this song took me 3 years to make, by the way. Like not so much that it took me 3 years, but like I started it and I spent a lot of time on it, and then I put it down for a few years, and then I picked it back up and finished it because I was like, I'm gonna finish this song. So I almost forgot to talk about the vocal chops. So my vocal chops here. So this is going through a telephone filter. You're not going to want to hear it solo by itself because it's actually really harsh sounding. I did mix it to make it less so. But yeah, vocal chops can get harsh really easily. But check it out. These chops that I got from like a Splice sample pack, I'm pretty sure they're by this singer, Tyler 47. And I basically just chopped it up and, chopped up each syllable. Let me see if I can actually show you guys this, because this is actually an important thing worth going into. Definitely worth going into. So vocal chops, let's talk about it. What this is several different samples that I pulled from Splice and then ended up chopping up and putting into like a library, not a library, like a kit in Groove Agent which is literally the stock Cubase like drum library thing. So check these vocal chops out by themselves.
It brings us closer. It brings us closer. I never wanna leave. I never wanna leave. I never wanna leave.
So as you can see, like it's nothing crazy. It's like a couple of the same line. It's like super heavily tuned because like understandably like they process their vocal samples to like be very friendly to work in as many different like arrangements or songs as possible. So what I did, I'm not going to redo it because that's going to scramble my whole project, but I chopped these up into different sections, and then what I did is I just dragged them in right here. So like I said, I'm not gonna do it because it's gonna mangle my project. But I just dragged these in here, and it auto-populated my Groove Agent library. Now, when you when you play this, there's obviously like I put so much distortion. I'm gonna go into the actual mix processing of that later, but you can see there's like a lot of distortion. So like when you chop up the syllables like that, you get a little cell that populates, and you can kind of like, you can see like I tune them all to be in the key, and I literally just like played them on the keyboard. Let me see if I can actually show you guys. So I don't really have I don't have like a vocal chop writing process that is the best vocal chop writing process, but what I do is I just kind of like mess with it until like find something that I like. So like in this case, there it is. All right, so these are all pitched up, obviously, and some of them are pitched up more than others, but like I kind of just like play with it until I find something that works. So like so what I like about vocal chops is when you get these kind of long ones that are two different notes. This was a really cool thing, and it actually comes in a different part of the song. I might as well play that part of the song because I'm not going to actually like, go into that part of the song from a production perspective because life is short, but... Yeah, and besides, a lot of those elements are already happening in the other sections of the song, so I'm going to break them down anyway. If there's something I miss, I might go back to it at the end. But yeah, so check it out, like... It's just a really cathartic kind of like vocal chop sound, and that's what you get from when like you have these vocal chop sort of like melodies that are like... Yeah. So that's how you get more interesting vocal chops, is if you have the ones that are like more than one note, or they're like notes gliding into other notes, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what I like about, that's what I try to get out of vocal chops, is to get like a really kind of like super epic and cathartic vocal sound. Yeah, so moving on to the drop section, I have like, several different like, Serum sounds, and I'm going to play this out, and then I'm going to go into a few of them. Yep, and then it goes into like vocal chop, like, tornado. So yeah, basically, the biggest thing here is my Serum sounds. And I have a saxophone that's literally just like a sax library. I'm gonna tell you which one I used. No secrets here. VG Jazz tenor sax. I think it was free. But it sounded pretty dope, so I fuck with it. Yeah, so I got my sax, I got my harmonies. The harmony actually sounds pretty dope. Normally your harmony doesn't actually sound like the way that your melody sounds. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't sound like good on its own, but this harmony really worked. Yeah, the trick with harmonies is to not draw attention to the harmony. Sometimes like your inclination will be to just like move in thirds, but sometimes those thirds aren't like, necessarily like the right fit for the note that you're trying to harmonize based on the chords that it's underneath. So that's why I try to be flexible with my harmonizing, and to make sure that it's, working with not only the melody, but with the chord progression that's happening underneath as well. That's a big thing that I try to do. So, when you listen to the song, you don't even hear the harmony. You just hear, the harmony of the song as a whole. So that's kind of what I go for here. And mixing your harmony lower than your main is obviously crucial. So I got several different synths. Spoiler alert, I use presets because I don't give a fuck, and it gets me to my destination faster. This is just a really attacky sort of like, yeah. So that kind of adds like a little bit of attack. Kind of adds to the kick drum a little bit, and it just adds like, chords on top of it. And then I got my Serum LFO. I have several different like really like, listen to that shit. That is gnarly as hell. And you get that from this kind of like filter sound. When you have a filter and you have it kind of like automated up with an envelope, let me see. So yeah, so check it out. Like when you have a lot of resonance to something and a lot of drive to something, and it's kind of like a filter that's moving around, it creates a little bit of that like wah, 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 you know what I mean? Like it's like, expanding a little bit. So like without the filter, it's just the sound. Like, don't get me wrong, like that's a gnarly bass sound, but the way that you get it to kind of expand like that is like with the filter. So that's huge. And then obviously like we have all of our effects here, adding some compression. Multiband compression, of course, makes it really like, the sound that you want, which in my terms is, compressing the bass down a little bit and letting that sort of top end be dominant. So I try to do that because like I have my low end taken care of when it comes to the, like I got my mid-range things like with the pads and the 808s and that like sort of like top bass or whatever. So like I don't actually need any, bass from this guy. I really kind of just want that like texture and that top end. So that's why the multiband compressor really helps with that. Yeah. So, and then I got my distortion, which is just, y'all gotta play with this Serum distortion thing. It changes the sound completely. Like, listen to that, and then listen to this. Like, this isn't anything. I wouldn't invite this guy to a party. I would invite this guy to a party. So, Shout out distortion. Reverb, sometimes it helps to have reverb on the sound itself, because it really just kind of like puts in a space. I don't know. I never put reverb on stuff directly, except for like Serum patches, because the Serum reverb actually like adds to the sounds in a way that other reverbs sometimes like can't as well. So, all right, Trance. All right, so Serum, one of my faves, like, you know, of all time. Another one of my faves is this, Silent. If you're trying to do those like trancey sort of sounds, like Silent is your best friend for sure. Like that's how you get those like really lush, like sort of like Avicii type of chords, is like with Silent. I'm sure there's other options, but Silent is kind of the go when it comes to that stuff. So I would definitely put that over like, you know, Massive or Serum for those sort of like super saw sounds. So yeah, I mean, all this is just a sort of like a filtered, you know, it has like some, what does it have? Yeah, I think it has like an LFO. It has an LFO, so that's kind of how it gets that sound. Actually, no, it's just volume. Yeah, that's not even an envelope. That's just, you know, straight like uncut volume, just a volume LFO. Yeah, just on a half saw. So that's all that is, and that's how you get that kind of like really cut sort of sound. Is just it's a square wave, so it's like dit dit dit, you know. Yeah, that's how I get that sound. And then I got my filtered Trance eighths. I don't know, like I might have gone a little bit overboard on the arrangement here, but I mean it sounds really full and really fire when you hear it. So like, this is a filter. That's the difference between just like a volume envelope and a filter, is that this is actually like, you know, automating the cutoff and automating the LFO rate. So when you have like an actual filter, it kind of like opens up, because it's basically just like an EQ that's just going like, you know, taking the, you know, it's like a low pass that's just moving and letting those high frequencies in over an amount of time specified by the rate. So that's basically just like, you know, what's happening here. For this drop, I opted out of using an 808 because I didn't think that an 808 would really fit this section in terms of like movement, in terms of the mix and things like that. So I actually used a massive, like kind of like an LFO sub, because I knew that I had all these like synths that were hitting on this like dun 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 dun, you know what I mean, type of like, you know, like rhythm. So like I really wanted something that was going to move with that in the bass. And so I have just like a massive sub that's just kind of moving with all these different synths. It's probably hard to hear that unless you're like using a subwoofer, but like, you know, that plus this, it's just like another kind of LFO sub. So I have these two things kind of taking care, you know, like normally I wouldn't stack my basses because you're just kind of like, you know, asking for like low end management problems, but like here I kind of just beefed it up with two basses. So you can hear that there's a lot happening here. I have an LFO mapped to the pitch, and I have a delay set on it so that it expands, and then by the time it has expanded, that LFO kicks in and like jiggles the pitch. I don't really know how to describe it. Check it out. Yeah, you see how that LFO doesn't kick in until the LFO has until the other LFO on the filter has expanded. That might be kind of hard to understand, but basically like there's an LFO on the filter that's actually, you know, opening that sound up in terms of like letting those high frequencies through. And by the time it's opened up, that other LFO kicks in, the one that's mapped to the fine pitch, and that LFO is actually moving the pitch up and down. So that's what's giving it that sort of sound. So that's kind of how I achieved this like fancy kind of like, you know, vibrato Serum filter situation. So the best way to understand this is watch the filter and watch this LFO. Yeah, so that's how you get that sound. Serum fat bass. What do we got? More basses, Jesus Christ. Oh, of course. The classic. The marshmallow bass. This right here is a YouTube tutorial. It's somewhere. Marshmallow Chew. Yeah, I think I So how you get this sound is you just have your filter and an envelope, I guess, on the volume. And the envelope of the volume is just kind of turning the volume down real quick. Filter is just activating real quickly, taking those high frequencies and taking them out. So that's how you get that kind of like plucky marshmallow bass. A lot of like pluck sounds are based off of like a filter, just like, activating real quickly and just kind of creating that sort of like decay to the sound using a filter. So that's, and as you can see, it has a lot of attack to it as well. Yeah. So that's mainly the only takeaway from that. Yeah. And then I have just like, mad samples just layered, mad drum samples. I had a lot of breakbeat. I wanted these drums to hit a little bit differently from the drums in the rest of the song. So I just have like, a bunch of different like breakbeat samples, I guess you could say. Yeah, and a big sound is I think the most important one is this kind of like, I think there's like a woodblock punch. Yeah. 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 So there's just like several different snares layered on top of each other, and the woodblock layered on top of like the dubstep snare is huge in this section. Yeah. So that's what I was going for there. The other thing that's worth talking about is, these toms that I have in here. But yeah, those toms are ridiculous. But most of how I got that to sound like that is from slamming it into an L1176, which is a mix thing. So I'm not going to talk about it right now. This song is very like, intense in terms of like the theatrics and all the different things that are happening. So what I have here towards the beginning of the song is this like tempo ramp that happens like between this section and this section. So obviously like the tempo's picking up. So like I don't care what anyone says, make sure that you compose 100% of your things to a grid, even if you're going to change tempos in the song, because you'll have issues later if you don't. So yeah, the tempo kind of ramps up here, and then it kind of just leads into Arrangement City, and by the time it's at Arrangement City, it's kind of at the tempo that I want. Yeah, and then that's pretty much it. There's a lot of different sounds here. So that's just like, all this like body fall and crowd gasp and all that stuff. Like I just found these sounds on the internet. I think either freesound.org or like YouTube or whatever. And just like my favorite thing, right? Check it out, is even the person who put the sound on the internet named it That Crowd Gasp, and you will recognize it. You know the one. So that's That Crowd Gasp. And then into the EDM purgatory, or EDM hell, with all the different synths and stuff when you've been listening to like a classical chill intro. Yeah, and then the last thing I'll talk about is the piano, just because I want to make sure I don't skip over that completely. Yeah. So the piano sound is just like the giant, I have it on like extra large with the bright stage and just a ridiculous amount of like everything, you know what I mean? Because it's just like supposed to be like extremely cinematic, so it's like so bright. And kind of like how I get that is by moving the color up a little bit. Like you can make it pretty bright, and you can make it dynamic as well, but I just kind of had it around here, I guess. And then yeah, so the other thing that's worth emphasizing real quick is I had this this is the last thing, I promise. I have this kind of like this section where everything kind of like devolves. It like deconstructs into like the next section with it where it's just nylon. And what that is that's just like me reversing a bunch of things and creating that like sort of like dreamy sort of reverse sound to the whole arrangement. And I just reversed a bunch of these sound effects from the beginning of the song. to kind of like, to kind of emphasize that sort of like introspection. Like, it's like, I don't really know how to describe it. It's like, yeah, it's super, super dreamy, super cinematic. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful. I hope that this kind of like shed some light into like, if you've heard the song and you wanted to know like, what even is that? Then I hope this was helpful for that. I hate keeping secrets. I will tell you which libraries I used, because I think that, the more people that know about the tools and resources that exist, the more good music there will be in the world, and that's what we need. So yeah, I mean, like, comment, subscribe. Please let me know what you would like to see more of, if this was good, if this wasn't, if there's some stuff that you think could be better. I'm open to suggestions, and please check out the song, because like it took me 3 years to make, because I was just like, really off and on with it, and it was a very kind of like laborious project, so it took a long time for me to actually like find the right sounds and the right sort of like compositional elements. So yeah, let me know, and I'll see you guys soon.